Is Wagner head Vingy Prigozhin admitting that the Ukrainian counteroffensive is likely to succeed? And is he positioning himself to come out on top, no matter who wins? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's April 15th, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, first, let's talk about the control map. Biggest change is no changes, just minor frontline updates. You guys can see a small, probably a correction of just a few really 100 meters of territory near this rail line in Ukraine's favor, but I wouldn't take it to be anything of significant meaning. I wouldn't interpret that. When we look over at the combat map, you can see Russia launching just 56 attacks over the last 24 hours, concentrated very heavily in Bakhmut, with a smattering in other locations like the northern and southern prongs of the Avdiivka encirclement and near Marinka. But where things get sort of interesting, first off, when we look at the UK's Ministry of Defense, they're reporting that the Russian Duma established digital conscription. That's right. Now, state conscription notices are going straight to Russians' spam inboxes. And of course, by avoiding having a fixed address, some have been able to dodge their conscription notices. But obviously, assuming they've provided the government with a valid email, they'll be able to get electronic draft notifications. But again, like a lot of these theoretical electronic systems, when any government rolls them out, they're highly likely to not actually be that much more effective. If you don't want to get found, you won't get found. And they don't come into force until later this year, and they don't think it's linked to any specific increase in mobilization. But here's where things get really interesting, guys. Prigozhin is setting up what ISW is calling information conditions to exploit a Russian military failure if the Ukrainian counteroffensive is successful. He published, it says an essay, probably like an op-ed, on April 14th, yesterday, which argues that Ukraine's coming counteroffensive is more likely to succeed than fail. Prigozhin, and here's where things get interesting because he's borrowing from a very familiar playbook. Prigozhin warned that a selfish Russian deep state, which he defined as a community of near-state elites that operate independently of the political leadership of the state and have close ties to their own agenda, which actually describes himself as well, that the deep state is currently in crisis due to the Russian military's failures to secure a quick victory. Prigozhin accused the members of the deep state embedded in the Russian bureaucracy of deliberately sabotaging Russian success in the war because they seek to resume their privileged lives of comfort. That logic doesn't really hold. They would want a quick victory to quickly resume their privileged lives of comfort. Prigozhin said these internal enemies will push the Kremlin to make serious concessions tantamount to betraying Russian interest and could even return occupied Ukrainian territory to Ukraine over the course of just a few years. That Russia must, and he, of course, positions himself as the great redeemer against the Russian deep state. He said he must ignore the deep state's temptations to cut Russian losses and settle. The Russian military cannot stop fighting now, he says, and that unoccupied Ukraine is now politically opposed to the Kremlin. They must continue to fight relentlessly, no matter how bad adverse conditions become, and that Russia. Interesting. He said any scenario where Russia faces defeat will result in a groundswell of radical national feelings that will serve as a catalyst for a reinvigorated Russian patriotism and enable the Russian nation to undergo a baptism by fire necessary to emerge victorious and defeat Ukraine. This glorification and idea of like a nation purified through war is a really, really, really tried playbook. I'm trying to think of the non-demonetized way to explain it, that many authoritarian countries in World War II relied on. That's a really common narrative, and it's one of the ones that, you know, even politicians nowadays who get accused of being ideologically aligned with that type of authoritarian, they usually are not this explicit about, the glory of war and forging people in conflict, forging a nation in conflict. This is some pretty heavy stuff. And Prigozhin, of course, is almost certainly positioning himself as the embodiment, the leader of these radical national feelings, right? He's trying to cut out Putin's strong Russian nationalist power base out from under him by sort of tainting the well, accusing, again, the people who currently are looked up to by ultranationalists, by accusing them of being deep state actors who have only their own interests in mind. So a really interesting sort of take on things. As always, guys, that's all I had. Of course, thanks to the Combat Vet News members, our Colonel tier members. I really appreciate you. All of our Lieutenant tier members. And also, of course, if you want access to the combat video breakdowns that I can't show you on YouTube, I do all of those on combatvetnews.com. It's my own website. We drop news stories every single day, curated news on the Ukraine conflict that I can't get to in these daily updates. All my YouTube videos are out here for free. And of course, if you become a member, right, support my content, support me being able to do this, since you guys know that lots of creators have gotten demonetized, especially after these Pentagon leaks. And of course, we check out all the helmet cam footage, the body cam footage, the drone footage, the stuff that I can't show anywhere else. Thanks as always for your support. I'll see you in the next one.